If you've been keeping tarantulas for a while or you want to jump into the hobby, it's really hard not to notice how steep the prices you can get with a collection like this. Especially if you want more than one tarantula, everything can really add up. Many items have really harsh prices, and whenever you're buying in bulk for many tarantulas, or you're slowly collecting more, it can definitely add up and be a bit unsustainable. So if you want to save some money on tarantula enclosures, you've come to the right place, because I'd love to share my tips and tricks on how I have made this hobby a little cheaper on myself, while also upping the kind of luxuries my tarantulas get and being able to have more custom items that are perfectly fit for them. Now, starting with enclosures, many pet stores, the enclosures are very expensive. Maybe the cheapest one you'll find that is made of glass or such will be around $75, and a lot of the time they're not really built for tarantulas. They can have mesh lids, which are very harmful to the tarantula's feet since they can get stuck and maybe even lose a leg. I actually adopted a tarantula from an owner who had a mesh lid, and the tarantula had gotten stuck and ended up having to leave its leg. But sometimes that's not the case and the tarantula will get stuck and die, so we do want to avoid those mesh lids. And when shopping in that reptile section, it's very easy to find only mesh lids and not much custom stuff. Typically, whenever I go to the pet store, the only enclosures I see that are made for tarantulas are these Reptzilla enclosures. I have quite a few of them, and they are very nice, but they do break, and they have some issues with them, and sometimes they're just not what I'm looking for, and they do not have an option for fossorial species, since they only offer terrestrial and arboreal enclosures, which cannot hold a lot of dirt at all. Now, with tarantulas, especially if you're raising one up for a sling, it's very important to have a lot of different containers that they can move up in, since if they're in too big of a container too soon, they will not be able to thrive, or sometimes they will even die if they miss out on food or get stressed. So it's very important to find affordable options to help grow up your tarantula safely. Calculating the prices of having multiple enclosures per tarantulas, it gets pretty ridiculous. Even if you have a couple to grow out containers yourself, sometimes you'll have new tarantulas coming in and you'll need to get even more, and then they end up just kind of sitting in the closet collecting dust once you're done with them, and they can be just as expensive as adult enclosures. But by making your own enclosures, you can choose the custom size and grow up size, and you can perfectly tailor it to their fossorial, terrestrial, or arboreal, or whatever in between needs they have. I have done this for plenty of my tarantulas since starting this hobby, and it has worked phenomenally, especially whenever I am raising babies and they need to move quite a bit. Now, if you go to your local Home Goods or Burlington or Ross or pretty much anything, you can find food-grade containers that are perfectly shaped for a tarantula. I use quite a few, and here in my hands, I have what I'm going to make into a grout enclosure for my sling OBT, since he is getting a little big for the deli cup I got him in. Now, any container will work as long as the lid seals and it is food grade. It's quite simple to transform these containers into enclosures, so just pick up a size that works for you. This one I got, for example, was only $3. I'll take out my ruler and I'll mark holes across the top of the enclosure to create cross ventilation, which is plenty for the tarantula, and it helps prevent mold and all of those other issues which you'd be looking for in an enclosure. Then with a drill, I simply just drill the holes in and clean it up a bit, and it will be ready to turn into a full-fledged enclosure for your animal. By making your own enclosures, you can choose the custom size accurately and save a lot of money. This enclosure obviously will not be an adult enclosure, but it will be great for him to transition into the juvenile and maybe even sub-adult stage. And fortunately, since I could choose the shape, I could put more dirt into this enclosure and also allow plenty of space for him to climb around, since OBTs are fossorial with semi-arboreal tendencies and they love to have that kind of space to run around and dig. I honestly prefer this method over getting something at the pet store, since I can very much custom make it to the tarantula's needs, and I don't have to skimp out on anything because I don't want to buy an extra grow-up enclosure. These also hold moisture in the substrate very well, along with not having the issue of substrate or water leaking out, which I've found with other enclosures that don't have mesh lids, such as the one behind me, which I've had to glue the bottom with some silicone so the water would not leak out, and that can be very troublesome, especially when you're paying so much money for the enclosure. With tarantulas, they're not the most popular hobby, so we definitely have to work around a little bit. And finally, just like that, in a couple of minutes we have a usable custom enclosure for our tarantula. So I'm going to move him into this one and he's going to grow up a bit. I'll also show some other custom enclosures I have made with food containers to save money. These have all costed me less than $10, even with the decorations. So now that we have this $4 enclosure finished with a little bottle cap since he's quite little, so I'm not going to put a full water bowl in there, we're just going to move him in. I got him as a sling. He has been in here for about 2 months and he has molted since then, so he's ready for an upgrade. So we're just going to get him out. He's small but definitely ready for an upgrade, and I think he will use this enclosure all the way through. I'm just gonna find him. I think he's on this mess. Let's see. Oh, I see him right there. I see his little abdomen. I'm just going to leave this sphagnum moss here. Oh, there he is. He's coming out. Look at that pretty little face. Now, he's not super orange yet, but whenever I shine a really bright light, he does look quite orange. I'm just excited for him to get those OBT colors, and I am hoping that he is a female. Let me see if I can show him off a little bit more. He's quite active. There we go. Wow, he's handsome. Look at him. So he will enjoy this enclosure. He has wood to hide under and things to web up. So for the price of $4, I think this is a fantastic enclosure. If you want to decorate your tarantula enclosure, you might have noticed how steep wood prices can be. Some cork bark I've gotten has been as cheap as around $7, but then again, if you want multiple pieces, it can add up very quickly, especially for my arboreal tarantulas. Or if you want a larger piece that really helps the enclosure come together and gives your tarantula more space to explore. Or for example, like my tailless whip scorpion, who loves his wood and loves to hide between, it's very important to get more than less. I took a look at some local pet stores today, chain pet stores, and the cork bark there, along with other types of wood, can be upwards of $25 a piece, which is completely outrageous if you're trying to decorate a tarantula enclosure. A lot of people don't know that you can actually sterilize the wood you have at home outside and make it safe for your tarantula enclosure. I have been doing this for mine and they have absolutely adored it, and here I'll show you how. First, I just take a hike at my local park and I pick up pieces of wood that are generally a nice size and shape for what I'm looking for. You can kind of be picky here since you're just taking from the wild. I usually take pieces that have already fallen off the trees. Just make sure you're not harming somebody's trees. Next, if it has any moisture on it, I like to leave it outside just to dry off a bit. Then I will put it on a rack with some parchment paper, heat my oven to 190 degrees Fahrenheit, and let it cook in there for an hour or two, and this kills off all the mold spores, any microorganisms on the wood, and it just sterilizes it completely and makes it safe to use for your tarantula enclosures. Now, I personally prefer the thinner wood. Since tarantulas aren't very heavy, they're not going to be breaking the wood by walking on it, and this allows more space in the enclosure, and you can really maximize that space by having multiple pieces. I have my Antilles pinktoe, and he has 3 pieces of curved wood which he loves to hide inside and crawl around, and I prefer it much more than the store-bought cork bark. And luckily with this method, it saved me a lot of money because it makes wood essentially free, and that helps me a lot with perfecting my enclosures and making them perfect for my little tarantulas. Now, third of all, you can definitely find better water bowls elsewhere than at the pet store. I've noticed the pet store water bowls, while being upwards of $10 to $15 to $20 to sometimes even $35, they'll often be either too big, too shallow, or just something else that just isn't quite right for a tarantula. Since with tarantulas, you don't want the bowl to be too wide so they don't accidentally drown or slip in or anything weird like that. They just don't need a wide water bowl. And second of all, you do want some depth in the water bowl, especially for the adults, so it doesn't evaporate so quickly. A lot of water bowls I've found have been at thrift shops actually. Candle holders that are made of glass work especially well, and I also have little porcelain food grade water bowls that resemble bell peppers and tomatoes, which are super cute and decorative for the enclosure, and none of these water bowls have been over $1 or $2 for me to get. I think they add flair to my enclosure, they're definitely more personal, and they fit the needs better for my tarantula, and as long as these things are food safe and made of glass, you will be good to go, since they won't seep out any chemicals into your tarantula's enclosures. Now, using all these tips all together, I'm able to make a tarantula enclosure for about $10 each, and that really helps me with my hobby since I want to focus on collecting more species and making personal enclosures. I honestly prefer doing these enclosures over buying the store-bought ones and trying to work with them since they often do not fit the needs perfectly, and it's always a little better to do things yourself and get them just right and personal for your tarantula, since there's so many species with so many individual needs, and maybe your tarantula's personality is a little different from what other things suggest. I would like to throw in some other decorations that I have found at Walmart which work perfectly for my enclosures, which one of my favorites is the fake flowers. These do not seep any dye or chemicals off of them, and yet they're only 95 cents a bunch, and they really help make my enclosures pop while also adding foliage for my tarantulas to hide under and use as shade, which has made them more comfortable to come out, and I absolutely adore that. Next we have these little stone decorations. As long as you wash them off good before you use them, they work excellent as little decorations and textural differences here and there, so I definitely recommend those too, and you can get a bag for about $2 or so. If you have tips or tricks of your own that you have been using for your tarantulas that have worked out well or saved you a bit of money, make sure to share them in the comments below. I'm really interested since I love this hobby so much, but it can definitely get expensive, and for a lot of people that makes it less accessible, so I would definitely like to find other ways to make the hobby even better for a lot of people. And if you've made it this far in the video and you would like to see more, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye!